My best friend ousted me to my crush in the whole school. Part 2. Can I talk to you at lunch? He said. Sure. I gulped then and ran off as fast as my feet would allow me. So my execution had been postponed. How fun. As it was, I was stressed out about stuff at home. I felt as if my mom and I were walking on eggshells with my dad. I could feel the storm coming. How were we going to survive it? Only God, if he's there, knows. I knocked on the door and I opened it. Everyone turned to look at me. Good morning, sir. Sorry I'm late, I said. You can take a seat. Please do not be late again, Mr. Robinson said. He was one of the nicest teachers here. I was lucky that he was my homeroom teacher. Had it been someone else, they would have not been so forgiving. Maybe he had a late hookup, Macy shouted. Everyone burst into laughter. Not everyone that is late had been hooking up with someone, Macy. Some people actually have morals, Ian said. Ian was one of the few gay kids at school. His words instantly wiped the smirk off her face. I gave him a grateful look and sat down. It felt strange to have someone stand up for me for once in my life. I had always had to look down and endure it at home and school. That is what people like me did. They kept their head down and hoped that the trouble would soon pass. Weakling, my father's nickname for me, came back to me. I went through the rest of the periods pretty well. Saw Eli during third period and we passed a few notes. I was dreading what was going to come at lunch. I already knew what he was going to say. He was not gay and he was not interested in me. I could take it. My heart was made of tough stuff. So then lunch came, the bell rang, and my heart started racing. I packed my books in my bag and made my way to the lockers where I proceeded to dump them. As I closed my locker, I saw a pair of amber eyes. Tim was standing there, looking at me with a grim expression on his face. I held my chest and adjusted my footing. The surprise of seeing him had nearly toppled me over. Follow me, he said. I did as he said, and I walked after him. After a bit of walking, he rounded the corner, and we were at the back of the school. There was no one there, except a few loners who were eating alone. We came to a standstill beneath a tree. I looked at him, bracing myself for the truth. He looked at me, straight in my eyes, and started to speak. Hey, so first of all, I wanted to say that I was flattered that you wrote the letter for me, he said. Thanks, I smiled faintly. And I also wanted to tell you that I know that the intentions behind the letter were good. However, I am not gay. I do hope that you find someone who will love you for who you are. I know from what Eli told me that you have a heart of gold, he said. I nodded at his words. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy that I'd hoped would not come true. But it had, and I was going to be okay. I was thankful that he had been respectful. I would not have blamed him if he had said harsh words. Thank you so much for your kind words. I do understand, I said. Good. I hope that we can be friends, he said. Sure, man, I grinned and gave him a fist bump. It had gone the way that I had expected. At least it was over now, and I could stop stressing over the issue. We walked together back to the main school building. I noticed the stares and the looks of curiosity upon the other students' faces. They were dying to know what had just transpired between us. I wish they would have just watched a Real Housewives episode instead, because my life was none of their business. I found Eli in the cafeteria, sitting with Simon and scribbling in a notebook. Hey guys, I said, sitting down. They both looked up from their work and greeted me. So I spoke to him. I said. Eli's eyebrows went up and nearly touched his hairline. Oh really? What did he say? He asked. Oh, he was really respectful, but he rejected me, I said. How? Eli started, but thought better of it. Oh, I'm sorry about that. I hope that you will find someone else, he said. Thanks, friend, I smiled. Wanna come over for a sleepover at my house tonight? He asked. I'll have to ask my parents, but sure. Simon coming as well? I asked. No, actually, I'm not coming. I have a family dinner at my grandmother's place, Simon looked up from his book and said. He and I were good friends, but Eli and I were closer. Sometimes he joined us for a sleepover. For a geeky guy, he was actually a fun person to be around. Is it? That's okay, I said. I'd been hoping to get some alone time with Eli this week, so that we could talk about everything that had happened in the past couple of days. I felt as if there was a lot that we needed to clear up. The bell suddenly rang, signaling the end of lunch. I sent a quick text to my mom. Hey mom, is it safe for me to go to a sleepover at Eli's house tonight? Mom. Sure. Me. Did he black out again? Mom. Do not worry about it. Go and have fun. Me. You're sure about it? I put my phone away and made my way to class. I got through the rest of the day without any drama going on, which I was very glad about. A few hours later, I was at Eli's house. They had a big house on the posh side of town. It had big floor-to-ceiling windows and 2 stories. I always enjoyed coming here when I was little. It was an escape from the train wreck that awaited me at home. His parents were the nicest people that I knew. His mother was an interior designer, while his dad was an engineer who was hardly ever home. They had a nice, perfect little family, something that I yearned for. I did not resent my friend for having a better life than me, though. Eli and I played some games while eating a ton of snacks. His mom came by once in a while to check up on us. She was always a gracious host. Tim was at a friend's place, and would only get home later on. I was glad, because I was not sure if I wanted to see him at the moment. Crushes are not something that goes away if you wish it to. So, we should probably talk about what happened, Eli said, putting down his console. Our game had just ended. Sure, no problem, I said, turning to look at him. Why did you not tell me? He cut straight to the chase. He's your brother, I shrugged. We can tell each other everything. That is the definition of best friends, he sighed. I'm sorry, I should have been more transparent, I said. I'm sorry for invading your privacy. It is my fault that the letter got into the wrong hands. He looked at me with eyes filled with regret. I know that you didn't mean it. I forgive you, I said, hugging him. He felt like home. He was home. My best friend. Oof, so many emotions. I think that I'm going to puke, a deep voice said. I pulled away from Eli and saw Tim staring at us while standing by the door to the living room. Really? I will show you real emotion. Eli roared as he jumped over the sofa and pounced on his brother. They scuffled for a while, but it was clear who had the upper hand. Eli was soon lying breathless on the floor. His scrawny body was no match for his brother's physique. The same body that I was checking out. Who could blame me? His biceps looked good enough to eat in that vest. I shook my head and looked away. It was getting out of hand. You're no match for the Terminator, Tim grinned, showing his pearly whites. Terminator my foot, Eli wheezed after his retreating form. Says someone who sounds breathless, he chuckled. I could hear his laughter even after he was long gone. He had that kind of laughter that came straight from the belly. It gave me tingles. I warned my heart to stop acting up. The guy had clearly told me that he was not interested, but of course my heart did not get the darn message. I got off the sofa and offered a hand to my fallen comrade. You're here, yes, you will get the revenge. Now let us finish our game, I said, smiling kindly at him. For someone so small, he was very feisty. Okay, I will. Wanna go up to my room, he said. Sure, I grinned as I followed him. He was already out of the room and heading for the stairs. Later on that night, after Eli and I had hung out for a while, I had retreated to the guest room so that I could sleep. It was also the room next to Tim's room. I did not think too much about it before. I drifted off to sleep. I was awoken by loud knocks on my door. In a daze, I got out of bed and opened the door. Tim was standing there, swaying with red eyes. I was flabbergasted. He was the last person that I expected to be knocking on my door in the middle of the night. Hey, are you okay? I asked. Remember what we said? We could be friends? I need a friend right now, he said. I'm sure. What's up? I asked. Can I come in? He said. Of course you can. I stepped back and let him in. I liked sleeping with the lights off, so the room was dark. I felt around on the wall for the switch and turned it on when I found it. This bathed the room in a yellow light, and I finally saw him. I was taken aback by how he looked. He was not the Timothy that I knew. The golden boy with a megawatt smile was not present in the room. He was pale, eyes red, and hair messy. What's going on? I asked. I was beginning to get worried about him. Oh, just life, he laughed, a bitter, joyless laugh. You do not look like you're doing well, I said. I'm not, he said. I took his hand and led him to my bed and took a seat beside him. All of my sleepiness had faded away, and I was wide awake, alert. I was aware of his scent, his lost eyes, his dark hair, and so much more. What's wrong? I asked. Everything. I'm so tired of making everyone except myself happy, he said. Then stop, I said. Stop being the golden boy? Then who will I be? He asked. You will be just who you have always been. Tim, I said. He was rocking back and forth, glancing at me now and then. I wanted to hold his hand. Maybe I could risk it. It was a friendly gesture. So I held his hand, and to my surprise, he did not let it go. Who is Tim, though? I'm just a combination of everyone I meet, he sighed. No, that's only a small part of you. What do you want? I asked him. I think that I should get good grades, go to college, he listed, but I stopped him. No, not what you think you should want. What do you want for yourself? I said. He was silent for a while, and he looked up at me. His eyes glowed slightly when a bit of light filtered in. Then he kissed me. He pulled me in and kissed me. The force shocked me, nearly knocked me out of my body, but the pleasure tethered me to him. His lips were so soft and skilled. He leaned forward into me, and I fell back onto the bed. He continued to kiss me without coming up for air. I was hungry for him. I did not want to let go. We were forced to break apart, otherwise we were going to suffocate from the lack of oxygen. We were silent for a moment, breathing heavily and looking at each other. A million thoughts were racing through my head at that moment. I was surprised, happy, scared, and so many other things. That had been the last thing that I thought he would do. "But you said you were not gay," I started. His eyes widened and I saw the realization set in his eyes. He sat up and flew out of the room. In a matter of a few seconds, I was left sitting there. For a while, I stared at the door. I even pinched myself to make sure that I was not dreaming. It felt like a dream, like one of those moments when your body's just not on this astral plane. I turned off the lights, got in the bed, and closed my ears. I had a dreamless sleep for the first time in a while. I was no stranger to dreams about my dad finally doing something irreversible to us. The next morning, we had breakfast before Eli's mom dropped me off at home. I could barely look Tim in the eyes. Last night still felt raw, as if it had just been a few moments ago. I was just so glad when he got up and went off after he had finished his breakfast. I finished eating as well. I had some homework to do, so I had to go home a bit earlier than I would have liked, since my books were at home. Eli and his mom accompanied me home. After waving goodbye to them, I made my way up to the door. It was a lot quieter than I expected it. Usually my mom would be out and about already, washing some clothes or doing some housework with the door open to let in some fresh air. To my surprise, all the curtains were down and there was no sound coming from the house. However, I stopped in my tracks when I saw my mother and father sitting at the table, staring at each other. Shit. He was home. I was going to get hell for not going out without his permission. I should have come earlier. He was wearing his work uniform, which means that he had just come home from work. If I'd gotten home earlier, then he would have never found out that I'd gone out. He looked at me, and his eyes were filled with pure venom. I had barely a second to react before he threw a fork at my head. I ducked and it hit something behind me. "Dell," my mom shouted. "Do not speak, woman. This is between me and my son," he said calmly. That was a bad sign. When he shouted, I knew to keep my head down and let him finish. But when his voice was calm, I knew I was in trouble. "How nice of you to show up," he said, turning to look at me. "Good morning, Dad," I said. "It's not a good morning for me, son," he responded. "Why?" I took a step back. "Take a seat," he said. Okay," I said as I took a seat next to my mother. Something strange happened to me last night. There I was, minding my own business at work, when John asks me if I'm losing control of my household. I asked him what he means, and what does he tell me? He tells me that he heard his girls were discussing the fact that my son is gay, and that he has feelings for Timothy Winters. Now at first I think it's all rumors, so I call your mother to ask her if I can talk to you, clear up the misunderstanding. She tells me that you're at a sleepover at Eli's house, the same Eli who is Timothy's brother. Now my question to you is, what did I tell you about acting unnatural? He said. Dad, I started. I did not get a chance to continue, because the next thing I knew, my head was being slammed on the table. The pain had barely set in before I was yanked back and thrown on the floor. Then my father started beating the life out of me. He rained blows down on me relentlessly, and I cried out for mercy. But his demon had gotten hold of him today, and no amount of begging would release me from his clutches. My mother screamed for him to let me go, but he did not listen. I put my hands to protect my face, but soon the strength had faded. I could not see anything except the flood that was flowing down my face and into my eyes. I do not know when he stopped and left me lying there, in the pool of my own blood. I remember lying there, curled in a ball, and my mother's sobs in the distance. To be continued. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.